Welcome back to our half-hull modeling series. In this advanced section, what we're going to do is not only use water lines for lifts, but also buttock lines. Now, if you stick around to the end, I'll show you some techniques to take your half-hull model to a whole new level. So let's get started. So the next boat model that we're going to make is of the Dark Harbor. Now, I've always admired the lines of this boat, and it's really too big a boat that I would probably never build one. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to build a half hull because I'm such a fan of this particular boat. Now, I bought these plans from the wooden boat store, and it came in 4 sheets: the line plan, construction plan, came with a sail plan, and also a table of offsets. So it really has everything you need to actually build the boat. Now, this is more of an advanced half-hull model, mainly because we're going to use a combination of the water lines for lifts and the buttock lines for lifts. So let me show you. We look here at the line plan. We can see here is the loaded water line, and I'm going to, as I had mentioned, I'm going to use the water lines for the lifts above the water line, and then I'm going to use the buttock lines for below the water line. Now, this will give me the opportunity to make the top half out of a dark colored wood. In this case, I'm going to use mahogany, and then the lower, below the water line, I'm going to be able to use a lighter wood, and in that case, I'm going to use basswood. Now, pretty much all of the information is here, but there's a few things missing. One thing is these water lines stop, so I'll need to draw those over the rest of the way. The plan here, this scale of this plan, these water lines are in reality 1/2 of an inch apart. So that will give me 4 lifts, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, below the water line, why I'm using the buttock lines is, first of all, there aren't any water lines in here, and what water lines they do have are all down here on the keel, and you can see over here in the profile that the keel is pretty straight. So it really is not giving us any contour information as far as the shape of the boat. But what does give us that information is here that are the buttock lines. So we have the rabbit line, buttock line 1, and buttock line 2. And if you remember, that buttock lines run with the center line, so they go this way. And then, of course, the water lines run parallel this way. Now, what we have here, so this would be buttock line 1, and this is buttock line 1 here. Now, if we look here at the profile plan, we can see that this is 3/4 of an inch apart, which is the size of lifts that I'm going to make. But what we need to do is, this is a much bigger lift, it's 1 inch, so I need to add a buttock line in here, and then I also need to add a buttock line here. So all of that will be information that I need to draw onto the plans before we get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make copies of the line plan and then spray mount them onto a piece of poster board. I've got all of the copies now dry mounted to some poster board, and what I did first was I continued those water lines over, and you can see I did that in red so that you'd be able to see it easier. Now, the first issue here is that at waterline 1A, when you follow it over, it stops here at the contour of the boat, which is right around station 8. Now, if you look down at the line drawing, you can see 1A goes up here and it stops. So we need to continue that on over. And the way that we do that is we take our profile plan here, and so we'll say here at station 7, which is right here, station 7, and we go over at the water line that we want, which is 1A right here. We go over to where station 7 and waterline 1A cross right there. So now we can go over here at station 7 and we can mark that and make a little tick mark. Now what I did was I went ahead and did 4 through 8 in the very same manner, and I've got some little tick marks here then of each one of those. So now what I need to do is to take one of my yacht curves here and find one that matches it pretty well, like that, and then draw a line in here. Okay, so now you can see we've got our water line that comes all the way over, so that way we can cut that lift completely. Now the next thing are the buttock lines. And you can see here on the profile, I added some buttock lines. Now I added 2 right here, right at the rabbet. And you can see that the entire keel fits within those 2 lines. So the way I determined that was the distance between these 2 buttock lines, like I had said before, was 3/4 of an inch. So I went over another 3/4 of an inch, and that actually happened to be where the rabbet line was, or is. And what's remaining then is 1/4 of an inch. So what I'll do is I'll make the first lift, I'll make it 1/4 of an inch. Then I'll make a lift that is 3/4 and 3/4. And then this one, I needed another buttock line in here in order to come over 3/4. So the next step now is to lay out buttock line 3. You can see I did it on both sides because, as you know, profile plan, this part shows from station 4 to the stern, which is here, and this shows from 4 to the stem. So you need it on both sides. So the way that this is determined is I measure from the water line down to the contour of the boat here. So that would be plotted out this way. The water line down to there. Okay, so that's buttock line 3, and that is station number 4, which is right here. So then if I come up here to the water line and make a tick mark. So same thing, I'll follow through and do each one of those. And actually I've already done it. So we've got these tick marks here, and I actually put one up a little higher so that I could continue the line. Now remember, we only need the lift to go as far as the water line for the lower half. So now what I'll do is I'll connect those dots as well. Right there. All right, so now you can see I've got this now is buttock 3. So now that I've got all that laid out, I can now start preparing my stock. So what I'll need is 1/2 inch stock for above the water line, and then I'll need 3/4 inch stock for these 3 lifts. I'll need 1/4 of an inch stock here, and I'll need 1/2 an inch stock here. So that's the next thing I'll do is I'll get all of that material prepared. So I've got all of my lifts cut out now. Now I followed the very same process that I did in the earlier half-hull model of the Herreshoff 12.5. So what I did first was, cut out the lifts from the line plan and then made patterns of those so I could lay them out on my timber so that I know how much I needed. And as you can see here, I've got the upper above the waterline mahogany here. So this is milled down to 1/2 an inch, and there's the very first lift up here needed to be 3/4 of an inch, so I have some thicker stock for that first lift. And then for below the water line, I have a 1/4 inch piece of basswood here. And then some 3/4 inch pieces for the main buttock lifts. And then there's one little piece that needs to be left, and it needed to only be 3/8 of an inch thick. So now that I've got these all laid out, what I can do is start working on cutting them out on the bandsaw. Now that I've got my lifts all cleaned up, I'm going to dry stack them here to see how they all fit. And remember, the buttock lines go the opposite. Buttock lifts go the opposite of the waterline lifts. All right, that looks pretty good. So now the next step is to get these glued up. To get started with the glue up, I'm going to use my little glue up jig here, mainly because these lifts are really too small to put any kind of nails in it. So I've got them all arranged in there the way they need to go, and you can see on the back here that I've got all of my registration lines lined up. So the next step will be is to get some glue on these. So after letting the glue dry thoroughly, I've taken all of the clamps off of the bottom half of the model. So what I need to do now is, and remember this is where the water line is, so what I need to do is to smooth this side of the lifts down so that the top side lifts will glue on there properly. And the way I'm going to do that is to just simply take a little block plane and clean it up. Okay, we got that nice and smooth. Now, remember that this is the water line, so I have cut a pattern that is at the water line. So what I need to do now is to put this on here. I need to line it up with my little tick marks and cut out this profile. So if you would want to, you can think of this as the water line lift. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that out using my jigsaw. Once I got the profile cut out, I cleaned it up over on my disc sander. After the glue had dried on the waterline lifts, I got the clamps removed, and then I took the bottom half, which the buttock lifts, and dry fitted them to see how they fit, and I think they work pretty good. So once that's done, I then glued them up and clamped them together. All right, I've got that all glued up now. It looks like I got some really good squeeze out. So I'll let that sit overnight and move to the next step. Now that the glue up is all dry, I've put my profile pattern on the back side of the model, and I've lined it up with the waterline. And so the next step here is then to just simply trace it out onto the back side. Now I left these clamps on here to give it a little stability so that I'd have something to hold it better while I was getting this marked out on here. So now that I've got that all marked out, the next thing to do is to cut it out. Now that I've got the profile all cut out, I need to start shaping it. So what I'm going to do is start with the shear right here, which is this sort of gentle arc. Now I'm fortunate in that I have a compass plane, and a compass plane works in that you can turn this knob and you can change the sole of the plane to a radius. So what I do here is sort of get the basic radius that I want, and then it's just going to take off the high spots and give me a really beautiful gentle curve for the shear. That works beautifully. Makes a nice gentle curve. And you really want to see if something's fair is run your hand on it, and you'll be able to tell if there's any lumps. Okay, next thing I want to do is to attach a block to the back here so that I can start carving the profile. Okay, now the next step is to do what you've seen me do with the other models, is to start shaping it and matching down to these contour lines. Well, I've got a lacquer finish on the model, so it's all finished. And since I promised I would tell you a little more if you stayed till the end, then I'm going to show you how you can add a rudder to your model. So this is how I did it. After cutting out a 1/8 inch piece, the shape of the rudder, I then marked it on both the back side of the rudder and the model. I then used a Dremel tool in order to cut grooves in both the model and the rudder. And I cut the groove deep enough to put a 3-penny finishing nail in the slot. After positioning and securing the model, I mixed up some JB Weld, which is a quick set epoxy. I put it in both the model slot and the rudder slot, and then put the 3-penny finish nails in it and let it set up. Now the other thing that I wanted to show you was how you can put what is called a rail lift on a model. Now this is a model I made several years ago of a catboat, and you can see that it has this very thin piece along here that is what we call the rail lift. Now it's really particularly nice to put on a boat when the boat has some kind of a coaming like this one does. And the way that I did this was I simply took a very thin piece of material like this and then glued or held that on there like so, and then traced it, leaving just a little bit extra, about maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, cutting that out, and then marking out where the coaming would be and using a very thin strip of material then to glue it in there. Now one tip is to save this offcut so that you can put that in there and clamp that to the rail lift, and it'll help keep the shape of that when you're gluing it in. Now the other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit was presentation. Some presentations are done by putting the piece on a piece of a plaque or something like this. In some cases it really sets the model off very nicely. To do this is just simply to attach a couple of screws to the back side. I personally like it when the model is just straight and hanging on the wall like this. Now the way that I did that is that I would drill a hole at an upward angle on the back so that it would hang on a nail that is on an angle on the back like so. Well, that's it for our fleet of half-hull models. Now remember, you can get free downloads of the patterns of the lifts for the 3 models that I did in each one of the videos. All you need to do is to go to my Patreon account, and anybody at the skipper level or above can download those for free. So in the next video, we'll be using a half-hull model to pull the points off of it in order to make our line drawing for the tender Victoria. So as always, thanks for watching, and remember, if you're going to make it beautiful.